What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained, the #1 game development podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. I am your host, Brandon Pham, and with me a special guest, James Montagna. How you doing, James?
I am fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Now that you're here, this is the part of the podcast where I ask our guest, which is yourself, to introduce yourself to the listeners and audience out there. Where you been, where you at, where you heading. Just a quick recap before we get started.
Oh, that'd be my pleasure. Yeah, of course. I am James Montagna, director at WayForward. I've been here at WayForward for about 17 years making video games. And in that time, I've had the great honor of working on just a multitude of titles, including most recently, before the current one we're going to discuss today, I worked on Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp with Nintendo. Prior to that, I directed a game called Vitamin Connection for Nintendo Switch. Since then, or since I started work WayForward, I've also been involved in the Shantae series pretty extensively. Worked a bit here and there on River City Girls related things, not quite as much on those. The Mighty series of games that WayForward makes, and just countless other ones, really just quite a lot in the past 17 years. Yeah. And most recently, I'm very excited to discuss Yars Rising, which we're collaborating with Atari on. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, before digging deep in there, I do want to kind of at least mention, I have like a little short history with WayForward about 17 years ago. So I graduated from the Art Institute in Orange County. It was my first gig at WayForward. I was driving from OC over to you guys' office. I don't know if you guys are still at the same place by Six Flags.
We are across the street from Six Flags. Like literally directly across the street, but when you were around, it would have been a slightly different building.
Yeah, so it was during the I worked on Hannah Montana DS. I don't know if you remember that project way back.
Oh, I was involved in that game. No kidding. Wow.
So I don't know if we crossed paths. I was a low-level 3D artist back then, obviously, and yeah. So I don't blame you if you don't remember me. But like, my had a lot of good memories there. We were just a small group, in terms of just 3D artists, and it was my first gig.
Awesome! Wow. So you're on that game of all games, and you were here. That's so cool. Well,
yeah.
I'm glad it was a good memory for you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, just kind of to highlight that, I just wanted to say, like, a game company, like, just being around for that long just shows how special WayForward Technologies is. Being able to adapt, evolve, stay relevant, progress, succeed. In today's age, that's like, and like your career itself, 17 years at the same place is it's unheard of, right? It's actually pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And it's sort of career where the reason I'm still here is because I love it here. Everyone here, I think, has a great time making games, and hopefully it reflects in the work that we do.
Yeah, definitely. I want to dive right into Yars Rising, right? So it's a beloved franchise, right? Nintendo has the same staying power, right, as WayForward Technologies. You guys have always had, it seems like, a very close relationship, even when I was working on Nintendo DS, and the side scroller genre, the Metrovania type of gameplay. Over the years, you guys have been able to kind of really, I feel, own that space with all the different titles and licenses you guys worked at. So do you mind kind of just talk about like how Yars Rising started and when you guys started development and just the inception of the resurgence of it?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's a conversation that we started with the IP holder of the Yars game itself, which is Atari. And it was something where we'd worked together in the past on a title, Centipede Infestation, many, many years ago. Since then, I think both of our companies have evolved and changed in many ways. And we got to thinking, it's been a while. We should see if there's some opportunity for us to work together. Then again, so then the conversation started between the both of our companies about, well, what can we possibly do? What sort of brands can we visit, and what could we make together? And so the conversation began with, I think, Adam Tierney on our side, who's the head of business development, reaching out to Wade Rosen, who is the president of Atari, and having just a casual conversation about brands and what we're passionate about. And there were a number of different brands discussed. I don't actually even know what all of them were, but there was quite a few. However, we put together proposals for several of them, and one of them was a reimagining of the 1982 classic Atari 2600 title known as Yar's Revenge. And so we put together our sort of vision for it, which is a very unique vision for it. We proposed it to Wade over at Atari, and I understand his response was something to the tune of, I get a lot of proposals for Yars, and this is the best one.
Mm.
And we felt similarly fired up about it. So there was this chemical reaction with both of us where we're just like really into this idea. And we were thinking on our side, like, we have to make this game. And so when Wade came back from Atari and was meeting our enthusiasm, it really kind of blossomed from there. And so we discussed further how we would make this happen, what it would look like, and got into more of the details. I imagine it was probably several months of back and forth emails, followed by some visits here at our office. And that's where I became involved. And we had some meetings in person where we jammed on the story, figured out the game we wanted to make. And once we had a pretty solid vision for what this reimagining of Yar's Revenge would look like, the game was greenlit.
Nice. So what are the kind of design challenges trying to reimagine a classic game for a modern audience, right?
Of course. Yeah, there's always challenges. In this case, I think the challenges with that specifically are making sure that we present something that is true to the spirit of the original. We don't want to just take a brand and completely reinvent it and lose its identity. In fact, it's the last thing we want. And I imagine a lot of people saw the trailer and they're like, what on earth does this have to do with Yar's Revenge? And a little bit, I think we expected that response, and maybe we even like want a little bit of that response. But when you start to peel back the layers and dig deeper, there's actually a lot of connection to the original game, and it's something that we definitely have a lot of deep reverence and respect for. And so I think it's a little bit of a challenge to make sure we're always maintaining that, because we do have that deep reverence. We want to make sure that we're staying true to the identity of the original. And then on top of that, the challenges are, the challenges that you face with any sort of game development, really. There's a sort of challenges where you always want to be sure that you're providing the best experience possible. Everything's clear to players. It's always fun to pick up and play the moment you grab the controller. And so we meet those challenges every day with the work we do, and we do the best we can to overcome them. And in the end, as we near the conclusion of development on this title, I think we were able to overcome them this time, and we have something that we can be really proud of.
In terms of like the maybe this kind of leans back on what you guys do at WayForward, the consistency that you guys seen over the years. What is it about the WayForward technology, like your group of guys, multiple teams, your ethos, that seems to be working where other game development studios in the 17-year span, let's say, have that staying power that you guys have? Like, what is it that you guys continue to succeed on here that the other game developers can learn from?
Yeah, I wonder what the WayForward difference is. It's hard to say. I've been here for so long and not worked at other places because I love it here. I want to stay here, So I think it's a little bit hard to answer, only because I don't have like an outside perspective, but I have some hypothesis that I can share with you. And I think it's the fact that, I'll back up for a second. WayForward is an indie studio in the sense that we are independently owned and operated. Voldy Way is the president and owner of WayForward. And I think that kind of is a interesting sort of situation for a studio that's been around as long as we have to be indie for so long, and we're just under the same ownership. But I think it works because we stay fairly small as a company, and we're nimble, and we're able to do a lot of things and take on a lot of projects. We're small as a company in the grand scheme, but large for an indie studio, right? So we can take on just the right amount of projects and sustain ourselves while not becoming so large that it's unmanageable. But I think it comes down to an ethos that we all really have a passion and understanding of games. So we have all come together as people that grew up playing games and have this deep appreciation for games, and find anyone at the studio and there's a chance that they are a walking video game encyclopedia where we have some really talented, incredibly knowledgeable people. And because we've been able to gather people with this sort of mindset, I think it helps keep us on track of making sure we stay true to the types of games that our audience wants to play. And that might be part of like the secret recipe for WayForward success. Just it's my theory anyway.
Well, I mean, it's working, right? And I think the biggest thing there is just, this last year, and we just had an early conversation today where the year 2023, the theme of this year is survive until 2025, right? The impact of the last 2 years has been crazy, and just tracking those 17 years that you've been seeing these ups and downs, and to me, like, this is the biggest down I felt like our industry has ever gone through, right? In a weird year, because it's not like people stop playing games; people are playing more games than ever. And I would love to kind of hear your perspective, just kind of being so in tune with what's realistic in terms of development, but also just your personal opinion on what's going on.
Sure. I definitely hear many stories throughout the industry of people in all sorts of different situations. Um, I I totally recognize and understand that it can be rough sometimes. I feel like my theory is our industry always ebbs and flows, and there's different things that cause that. In this case, it might be like ripples that we're still feeling like post pandemic, right? So that's my own personal theory, and I could go like deep on that, but ultimately, um, I feel confident that our industry, whenever it has troubles like this, we will recover because human beings require entertainment. There's always a place for video games in this world, and I think video game like designer, maybe on paper, is like not the most like noble profession someone could pick, but I think it's necessary because we need entertainment. And what a video game designer does is we're all entertainers, and our goal at the end of the day, when I come to work each day here at the studio, I'm thinking about the player and the ways we can delight the player and ultimately bring people together. Mankind will never stop needing that. There's always this requirement of being brought together, and I think the pandemic is a great example of that, where people were playing more games, they're staying inside. They needed that sort of thing. They needed that sort of entertainment, and it was fulfilling this requirement. And so, pandemic or not, there'll always be that requirement, and we want to step up to the challenge to find new ways to surprise and delight and bring people together through the products that we make. Very idealized view of it, but I think as long as there's this need, which there always will be, we're going to have an industry, and we'll find a way to continue making games.
Fantastic. I would like to kind of go back to your guys' original proposal that is the best out of all the proposals that,
right, for
that
yours?
Atari have seen. Yeah. So for yours, right? I mean, with the reimagining, right, it really requires, like, it seems like what you guys excel at the studio, an encyclopedia of all the different iterations, the original, what made it special, and really deconstruct and then reconstruct of how are we going to pitch this so it is different but the same, and excite old and new players alike. Like, what were the key ingredients that felt, if you can explain the process where you guys finally brainstorm, like, this is it, this is how we're going to really nail this, this is why it's different, and this is what gonna motivate us to kind of get this going.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned before, we have a very deep reverence for the original game. I personally have played it very much, even though I personally didn't grow up on it. Just as someone that I consider myself a gaming historian, I had to go back and play this game. So over the years, I always have a familiarity with it. But there are people at our studio that grew up playing this game, and they have a bit of a different connection with it, and it's more nostalgic for them. And for me, I've just always had an appreciation because I think Atari is a company, they're one of the oldest names in gaming, as you know. And as a result, they have some of the most classic IP in the world of gaming, period.
Yeah.
And so, among all those IP, the reason I was always drawn to Yars personally, even though it wasn't a game that I played as a kid, was because it just really stood out as something different. When you play that original game, it's got these psychedelic colors, these really like this droning like audio that's just like almost hypnotic, and there's just something about it that really sets itself apart from the Atari 2600 catalog that I always was like, wow, there's something special about that game. And so our proposal, we wanted to make sure not to lose the elements of it that make it so special, that make it so unique and so different. But we also want to evolve it in ways like what can we do with this to kind of present it in a new light? And of course, most people wouldn't think to turn it into an side view exploration platformer game, or Metroidvania, as many people call them. I I think that's part of what makes this special is because it is a bit of a curveball than what people might expect. But there's good reasons for that, because I think it's important to surprise people with something maybe they didn't know they wanted, you know? And so, as far as the materials of our proposal, well, we reimagined, on a surface level, we reimagined it so the Yar in Yar's Revenge is actually a character who is a hacker girl. She's a 23-year-old hacker for hire, a black hat hacker. So she's a little bit unscrupulous, but she is named Emi Kimura. And so she's this college dropout that basically can't keep a job, and her only gig is really that she holds on to is she's part of this hacker crew, and they take odd jobs and gigs for hacking all sorts of different things, computers, companies, whatever. You come to them, and for a price, they'll hack whatever you need to. And so we had this concept. Okay, so this is a really interesting character. How do we expand a world around it, and how do we tie it back into the classic Yars game? And so we thought about the original Yars game where there's this fly alien known as the race, as a Yar, and there's a opposing alien known as the Kotile. And so in the world of our game, we represent the Kotile with this company called Kotek, which is this sort of uber conglomerate that is maybe one of the modern day like tech giants of our world. In the world of the game, it's like one of those. And so the story of this game goes that Emmy and her hacking crew get a mysterious client with deep pockets that reaches out to them to with an assignment to basically hack Kotek from the inside. And so the idea is Emmy will get a job there and win their trust. And then one night, coordinating with her hacker crew, she'll pull off her heist to hack Kotek from the inside for this particular gig. And the story gets interesting from there because she ends up getting caught. And so that's sort of the prologue of the game. She gets busted, she gets thrown in a cell, and now she needs to escape the Kotek building, thus the room-to-room exploration gameplay. But the ways we tie it into Yars don't truly come to fruition until further in. And so that was all part of our proposal where, well, maybe there's a little bit more connection to Yars than people are going to realize just looking at the teaser trailer, for instance, or just picking up the game and reading the back of the box. And there's a number of ways in which we incorporate the classic Yars from that foundation story that I've told to you today.
A lot of when revisiting like a well-built universe like Yars, right, is at the same time can be exhilarating is the restrictions of what that universe already have come before you guys touched it, and also how to kind of stay within creative decisions that you guys want to propel, and expand that universe? Like, what kind of line were you guys having to stay within? At the same time, how much liberty did Atari allow you guys to kind of really make it your own?
I have to say that Atari has been incredible partners for us, because there hasn't really been this sense of being constrained in any way that's unnecessary. They were really embracing our creativity here all throughout. And so I think the end result really demonstrates that, because we were able to take it in a really bold and interesting and different new direction, because we had their confidence in the story that we wanted to tell. So I don't know that we were necessarily constrained in any way on that front, but there's always the constraints of the universe that you're working in with the story that you've developed, and the confines of the classic story itself. Because we've had the ability to sort of reinvent it in ways, there was a lot we could do with that. So it wasn't necessarily a challenge. It was more like fun to see how we can fit in the classic game. And that's probably the extent of the constraints. And I think those are the type of constraints that beget a certain level of innovation and creativity, where we can do something really unique and cool. I know that's a really vague way to put it, but there are a lot of surprises to this game.
Do you mind kind of digging into the hacking mechanics, as part of the design elements that you guys are introducing in this?
Not at all. So in our game, Emi Kimura, the main character, of course, being a hacker herself, throughout the game will need to hack various things. She'll encounter all sorts of different terminals that we refer to as hacking terminals. And that will be her means which to do things such as open doors, or turn on like a sprinkler or something like that, or disable a laser tripwire security system inside of the Kotek building, to name a few common examples. And so the experience of hacking, we thought, oh, the perfect way to represent her version of hacking is to tie in the original Atari 2600 games. So as you're progressing room to room in this side view exploration, and you're having this thrilling action of like shooting down enemies and jumping from platform to platform, perilous pits, and going from room to room and exploring, you'll have a sort of dual gameplay experience. And a couple of people have referred to them as mini games, and I think of it more as like an alternate game that's running alongside the game that you're playing, because it's sort of, in a lot of ways, it grows with you and it teaches you, and they sort of affect each other in ways. So you'll be doing this side view exploration, but then when you're going to this hacking experience, it will be a gameplay, both gameplay gameplay rules wise, but also visually reminiscent to the Atari 2600 Yar's Revenge game. And so you'll actually see a display that looks like a LED screen with the classic style Yar, classic style Kotile. And what we do is we actually remix the rules of the classic game in just so many different ways. I think there's really just, I can't say an exact number, but there's quite a few of these hacking experiences all throughout the game that reimagine the classic Yar's experience. So it's a pretty exciting thing, because it also ties into the way you earn different ways to upgrade the player for the core platforming gameplay as well.
The funnest thing for me when talking to designers is like, you guys take a lot of what I feel like social commentary, like seeing what's going on outside in the real world, and really put it back into gameplay experiences, right? So nowadays, more than ever, I feel like we're really hitting like a digital age 2.0 with the AI abilities, the way to kind of deep fake, the way to kind of change and modulate voices, and really live like a second life online. And then you guys having such a strong hacking digital element to the game. I would love to just kind of hear kind of your thoughts of, what you think this is all about, with this ability to really socially just be antisocial in real life, and just be that person online all the time, and
Sure.
create a whole different persona, really.
Absolutely. Well, that's a really interesting subject, and it's one that a lot of us here at WayForward are personally very passionate about. The world is changing before our eyes. Even in the past couple years, we've seen the advent of artificial intelligence booming in the ways it affects the things we do in everyday life, and the entertainment we consume, and the products that we use, and it's all over the place. And so how we like work that commentary into the game, there was a couple of like ways. One thing that we were always thinking about was the setting of this game, right?
Mhm.
So the game Yars Rising takes place in the year 2049. So it's the future, but not the too far flung future. And of course, we had to think like, what kind of world is that? And so, as far as like a commentary on state of things, maybe it comes through in the character dialogue, which is fully voiced, by the way. We're very proud of that. Really amazing talent involved in the voices for this game, by the way. But there's a lot of interesting humor and banter and dialogue, but also just the setting itself. We thought, okay, well, we wanted to kind of think, what does a company like this look like in the future? And also, how do we kind of like maintain like this identity for the game itself? And we call it like a bit of like a retro future, which is something we like to explore a lot, because this keeps really interesting, where we kind of take some vintage designs and it's like, well, now it's circling back again this many years into the future. And so we sort of incorporate that kind of thing. And yeah, we had a lot of concepts that we ultimately were maybe with like two on the nose that we didn't incorporate. Like, well, what if like there's like an AI that's always talking to Emmy? It's like, no, we didn't decide to go in that direction. It's like maybe a little bit too on the nose. Although we have a lot of passion, we love the concept of AI. We love the use, the ethical use of artificial intelligence, and how we can like look to that and feel inspired by that and incorporate that into our workflow. But I think it's sort of thing where you will feel it in subtle ways, like the current events of our world and how it reflects in the game itself, because it just simply can't be avoided. There are little bits of that influence that seep in, so you'll have to look forward to get the more specific ways that shows itself, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, I think one of the themes that you guys are hitting on, and I would love to kind of hear your more thoughts about it. It feels like we're definitely hitting like a nostalgia age. It feels like it happens once every 10 years, but like lately it's like have been reminiscing about the 90s. We're seeing this a lot of like people really leaning into remakes. Like I myself are hardcore on the Resident Evil remakes. It's like there's like,
Those are
Snake
great.
Eater's coming out. There's so many
Yeah.
remakes coming out, and like super excited because that those are the games I grew up in
Sure.
those days, right? And the PlayStation 2 days. Like what do you feel like in terms of like gamer taste now, where people are kind of reaching for nostalgia to kind of recreate these experiences? In my case, I want to share these classic games with my children, like the games that in a lot of ways molded my personality, my thinking, my opinions on video games itself.
Brandon, you touched on something really interesting there with wanting to share it with other people. I think one of the reasons that we work on the IP that we work on, or we're so excited rather to do them, is because we love them. We want to share them with other people. I almost think of it as an act of video game preservation of sorts. It's one thing and it's a great thing to preserve the games as they were and bring them back, so make them playable again for people. So being able to remaster or even present it exactly how it was, there's amazing value in that. But I think the angle that we attack it from is a little bit different, in that we want to rejuvenate it and reinvent it and give it a new life for new generations, so that perhaps when people play Yars Rising, well, maybe they grew up with the original Yars, and of course, as you mentioned, nostalgia. It's such a powerful force. It's really appealing. You're seeing a lot of like Y2K stuff, like stylistically coming back even now, and it's really interesting to see. Like, oh wow, that's kind of circling back again. It's interesting that it's the sort of thing that's connecting with people. But what of those people that have never heard of Yars?
Mm.
Well, I think from creating something like Yars Rising, it's our little way of being able to show them the thing that we love like Yar's Revenge, and maybe they'll play this game and they'll go back and research more about the series itself and learn about it. And so it's our way of sharing it with the future generations, to not just represent it as it was and not even to remaster it, but to evolve it and then reinvent it and do put our spin on it and make it contemporary and cool and interesting and pop and fun. And maybe many years from now, someone will evolve our Yar's Rising. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a very interesting point that I've been seeing and observing, is that maybe it's always been the job of creatives to kind of dig into history and then represent it and make it new again. I feel like lately the youths don't appreciate history as much as I used to back in school. Like, I know my kids learn facts as it's coming, but they're not so as interested as what was happening 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You know, it isn't as interesting as it was, I think, in our generation. And I feel like designers, developers, any type of creatives are constantly kind of reaching back and reminding people, like, you know, we solved these issues before, especially in game development, right? It's like, hey guys,
Right.
let's not freak out, right? We've done this before. And in a lot of ways, a lot of modern games, I feel, are kind of missing that element too, where like we have like game loops, recall back, you know, like I think, and this is kind of going off tangent, but just to kind of hit the point, like I felt like the Batman series, right? The game, right?
Yeah.
Was in terms of like big budgeted games, for a while, there was this absence of like completing the arsenals and being able to use that always to the max. Like in Metal Gear, for example, right? You were able to kind of level up, be super good, and then the last level is like, let's use all these game design elements that we've been practicing on. And Batman just takes that to another level. It's like Batman 1, Batman 2, yeah, everything you learned in Batman 1, it's still there. You know, you're not having like you're not having amnesia and suddenly you forgot all your Batman moves. And then Batman 3 kind of built on that. I felt like, you know, in this type of generation, there's a lot of games that just forget, you know, the things that I felt like was in every PlayStation 2 game, you know, just building on the elements of the game and just making things cooler and better and kind of calling back. Yeah.
I think that is going to occur naturally to some extent, just over time as games evolve. We have a collective consciousness where some things get lost. But I think the great job of being a designer is we can dig into the archives and we can pull back things and we can represent things in new ways and reintroduce classic sort of concepts. And I think that's one of the things that is probably one of the tenets of WayForward itself, where we're looking at these classic gaming sensibilities, some of which are like a lost art or lost to the sands of time. And maybe not a lot of people are making that type of game anymore, or just a select few are, making like using those gaming elements anymore, and sort of bringing them into the future. And in our own way, for those people that maybe are not as actively, like you mentioned, digging into history, it's our own way of giving them a history lesson and putting in this contemporary package.
Yeah, I think that's still remains like the biggest strength of games. It's just the interactive ability to educate and to involve, and it still seems to be the main thing that most other industries try to kind of gamify with, right? And it actually has a bad buzzword tone to it, because gamify usually means wannabe game developers, but like
Right.
just takes the intro to it, but never really following through of the core concept of every game designer.
Right.
I'm sure you see this a lot. I don't know if you have kids, but like you see like these kind of these things in classrooms, right? That they're trying to involve, but like it scares me too that instead of hands-on experience, there's a lot of like iPads now, right? And which is great in its own way. However, you know, with the amount of time that technology just takes over our daily lives, you kind of just miss the just the regular nature walks and how that really feeds into the creativity, right? And
Oh, absolutely.
this age, it just feels like creatives, unless we get out and really go outside of the bubble, we're kind of, it feels like cannibalistic in a way where we're regurgitating digital stuff with digital stuff, and it's like
Right.
it's very rare to kind of see people get outside the bubble and introduce something like brand new and have something to say in this medium.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a little bit of that sort of like pulling from inside. I think the best mix is when you can take outside influences, maybe really unexpected stuff, and fold it into your game along with the conventions. I think the conventions make it more palatable while the outside ideas make it fresh. And if you can find a balance of both of those, you can introduce something really special and impactful. An example I might give is like any sort of hobbies I have outside of games, or any sort of special interest that I have. It's totally ripe for something that can become a part of a game. Like I worked on a game years ago, Vitamin Connection, which I mentioned earlier, and at the time I was really into Japanese Obon festival dancing, and so I thought, oh, this is like a really like fun, unique, interesting thing. And I was thinking, well, like while doing that, like how would you turn this into a game? How would you incorporate this into a game? And in that game, it became one of the sub game experiences where it's the same sort of rhythm and like the steps and the cycle back to the beginning of the flow of the dance, and the literal sense of like spatial sense of like dancing in a line with other people that Japanese festival dancing has. And I thought, like, what a unusual place to pull influence, but it ended up being one of the more fun parts of the game. And so the reason I bring that up is because that really is just a pure example of, well, it has the DNA of a classic game, like a rhythm game. That's a known concept in the world of games, but pulling some outside influence to kind of keep it fresh and interesting and new and unexpected. I think in Yars Rising, you'll find that there is a lot of classic gaming influence all throughout it. There's a lot of elements people look at it like, oh, that's like that one thing from that one game. Like, yeah, it really is. But we are also taking influence from everything we do in our lives as game designers. And there's some real world things where, sort of hobbies or things I saw on TV. Like there's an enemy that like is I'll give you an example. It's really specific. It's a weird one. But there's an enemy that's like a scorpion, and we have water areas in the game. And I was reading some article about pool cleaners just like randomly, and how sometimes they'll encounter like scorpions that you have to be careful during the summer because they can stay at the bottom of your swimming pool for hours and they can survive like under the water. And I thought, that's terrifying. That should be an enemy in the game. And so we just took the scorpion enemy and we started putting it under the water. And it was a real life thing that had this like influence that carried into like pool cleaners and scorpions. Like, why would you even tie that into the game? But yet it manifested and ended up being something really fun and quirky and interesting about the game, where it's like, oh my God, underwater scorpions now. And it's like, this is terrifying. But anything can be a place where you pull influence from. And that's a prime example.
Like you guys, I've always marveled at designers because to me, like it's there's like a correlation to how like comedians are, right? They take facts but are able to kind of twist it in a way and make it unexpected, right, to get a laugh. But in game design, it's to make it interesting to engage, right? And it's always been a mystery, like, where are you guys coming from? Because like in art, I come from a background of art, art school. There's a lot of avenues, right, to become an artist. Online, it seems to be a very common trade within the industry to see like at least a clear track, right, to get in the industry. Right. With designers, it seems like you guys kind of grow from somewhere and then get together and be able to like create games. Like there's still to this day, it's a complete mystery. It's like if a student asked me how to become a game designer specifically, right, it's not very clear cut, right? Maybe there's a track from a level design, maybe, yeah, but like there's not really an avenue where everyone can point to and say that's how you do it. So to aspiring developers out there who wants to be design, who wants to start thinking this way, like what if you can dive deeper to like these methodology that you see that works for you, just being curious, what is it exactly do you feel like as a designer to keep your tools sharp? This is how you get in the industry, get designing, basically.
Curiosity is a great word that you just used, and it's such an important one because I think it ties into so much of what we do. We ask questions constantly. We're very curious people as designers. What's the best way to approach this, or what's the best way to surprise people? What's something completely zany and unexpected that will just really like come as a delight and surprise? Um, I have my latest theory is that designers are born of obsession. I think some of the greatest designers are people where there's just no other path for them. They're so absolutely passionate and obsessive with it that there's no other reality that they would accept. And I could say that's certainly true for myself. I from the age I think that I could hold a crayon, I knew I wanted to make video games, and here I am, right? So I think if you feel passion for it, then you may be a prime candidate to do it. I get a lot of people asking me, how do I become a game designer? And ultimately, it comes back to one thing. If you want to make games, just make games. And people are like, oh, well, you make that sound so easy. But the truth of the matter is, if you are passionate and obsessive, you will find a way. When I was a teenager and I started driving my car, I don't recommend you do this, but I was 16 years old, and I'm like, I will make a game out of anything I see anywhere. And so I'd go to the gas pump and I'd start pumping. I'd see the digits like tick up rapidly. And my creative brain, I'm like, how do I make this into a game? I'm like, I'm going to try to stop on $40 on the dot. And so I'm pumping the gas, the numbers are ticking up, and then boom, oh, I was 3 cents short. I lost, maybe next time. And then next time I go get gas, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to play the $40 game, and I'm going to pump gas. And that used to be close to a full tank, believe it or not. God. But this is the way a designer thinks. Okay, so this is a like weird example, but it's that's just the way it is. Like I'll find anything and try to make a game out of it. And I think if you think you're one of those people that you're just really obsessed with, there's no other possibility for you, try making a game. Research it, teach yourself. There's so many resources now. People are so lucky. They have the resources I didn't have growing up. I couldn't dream of the resources people have, but you can go on YouTube and find like tutorials for just about anything you want to learn. And you can be self-taught and you can make a game. I've seen it done, and people have made successful games just in their own right, just learning by themselves, teaching themselves. Like it's their first game, and it's like people get hit on their first game, it can happen. So that's sort of a long-winded way to say, you can be self-taught. If you're passionate about it, there's resources out there. You can do it. It's possible.
I mean, it seems like you go outside and your brain is constantly thinking and applying these kind of principles that is innate with you as a game designer to like, how do I engage? Yeah. But like, I would love because there was this good amount of period where still ongoing, like Kickstarter makes headlines still with their analog games, right? Their board games, their card games. I mean, so many Kickstarter campaigns ends up on the Target shelves. If you go to Target, you're like, whoa, man, I remember seeing the Exploding Kittens. So it's a huge thing.
Right. Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, like these applications that family, friends, game night, these kind of everyday applications. What are you seeing maybe on your personal level that obviously is bringing it back? Because, making a digital game, at least, like takes years, takes months before you actually say something and actually see something, right? That happens on screen, right? What other things are you doing that kind of keep the mind sharp? Because the satisfaction too is to see something complete. Delaying satisfaction all the time is probably not the best way to kind of like see if your design works, right? What are there type of things that you're seeing that you're applying that you're like, hey, prototyping type of stuff that you're doing that you're feeling like, hey, these are principles that I would love to see more aspiring developers or even regular designers nowadays should do more often to kind of keep things sharp?
So there's this concept of game theory, and I think it applies across the board in the world of games. The same core principles that make the experience of something like a board game or any tabletop game, or even like a choose your own adventure novel, like the same concepts apply across the board, can apply to games. And so I think if you want to make games, it's a great place to start would be pencil and paper games. You could experiment with that. And as you said, those could take off all over the place. There's a huge audience for board games and tabletop games, and the sort of experiences that you can have without a screen. And a lot of that stuff can tie into the sort of games you can make on a screen as well. So if you want to get started in that realm, you totally can. And a little tidbit I might offer is a lot of the prototypes that we make, they don't always start on the screen either. There's a lot of times where we will make a game out of like moving around like pieces of paper. Granted, I don't know if for Yars there was a physical element, but we've built contraptions and we've had like things where there's like sliding paper to kind of simulate like a puzzle or something like that. I know for one of the Shantae games, I actually made a physical like prototype of like how's this going to work, where you have to like whip something to move like a piece around, and I physically like made these like scraps of paper and slid them on the sheet, and I used a pencil to like draw the path, and it was the quickest way for me to just physically like just build it. And then of course that goes into the game. So I think there's a way of creating prototypes outside of the screen, or even just doing rudimentary prototypes. One thing we did do for Yars was outside of the development of the hacking challenges within Yars Rising, I personally developed a sort of PC executable of like a remake of classic Yars Revenge with all the elements there. And what I just started doing was, what happens if you turn off this element? And I got rid of like the destroyer missile in the classic Yars Revenge that chases you around. How does it feel now? Okay, I got rid of the ion zone that you go charge in. What's the experience like now? And that was my own sort of way of prototyping it out. And ultimately, that wasn't the code or even the experience that ended up in the game, but it informed the development of that particular feature because I was able to prototype and explore and just try things out. So sometimes in development, you'll have to build something, whether it be on paper, and it's part of the process, or you just build a small prototype that proves out a simple concept, even if it doesn't end up being the foundation you build off of. It's all part of the creative thinking and development process. And as you mentioned, designers, sometimes their brain works a little bit differently. You're always thinking about these things and pulling influence from all sorts of different places. Embrace that. I think as a designer, if you want to be a successful designer, be open to that influence coming from anywhere.
Well, James, I want to congratulate you. We hit the near the hour mark, and hopefully it was just as fun for you as it was for me. This is the part where I actually shut up, hand the mic over to you to talk directly to our listeners out there of whatever you want to talk about.
Awesome. Well, this indeed was a blast, Brandon. I guess more than anything right now, I'm obsessively excited to bring Yars Rising to the world. So I guess I'm going to have to talk about that. This is a game made with a lot of passion and love for games itself. And I think that's going to reflect in the end product. So as we near the end of development and we get ready to share this game with the world, number one, I hope you'll look forward to it. And I hope you'll follow WayForward and Atari on our social media channels, where as we near the closer to later this year, we're going to be sharing more and more about this game and more looks at the world of the game and even the development itself. And I want you to be excited and look forward to it, and give it a shot. And also reach out to me personally if you have questions about game design. I'm always excited to talk about that as well. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to and be excited about from WayForward, even outside of Yars Rising. But right now, it's my core focus, and we're making the best possible game we can. If you are someone that grew up with the classic game, then there's definitely something for you. Don't think it's not for you just because it doesn't look like the Yars you grew up with. And if you've never heard of Yars, this is a great way to learn all about it. So I hope you'll enjoy the game.
Well, thanks, James, for giving us a peek at Yards Rising. Also, giving us like a quick TED talk on game design. It's always, it's just you guys are a mystery to me still, being in the industry for so long. But I always marvel at what you guys do and how you guys think. It's a very very unique group in the game development scene. But anyways, thank you guys. See you guys all next week.